Hello everybody, Indy here. Sorry for the humongously long absence from recording YouTube role-playing videos. Life happened. At first it was just a new game that I was totally getting into, and in the midst of looking for a new job it was, oh look, company's doing layoffs, look at this nice attractive severance package, let's take it. Now let's do all the work on the house, prepare it for sale, move out of this region of the country entirely. So that's where I've kind of been. So now I'm in my temporary one-room gig with my in-laws, and we're going to do the job hunt from here and end up somewhere else. And, you know, hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, you'll see my bookcase with dragons behind me again and stuff like that. But for now, we left off last time talking about skills in Rolemaster. And I had said that next were spells. So let's do that. First, I'm going to talk about some of the skill breakdowns categorically. Oh, and I've got a cold. So, well, I'm getting over a cold. Still have a lot of coughs. So hopefully this video isn't too choppy as I cut out all the coughs. So, the first category of breaking down skills would be the realms of power. So, Rolemaster breaks down magic into 3 general categories. First off, essence, channeling, and mentalism. Essence, the power is supposed to come from nature and stuff like that. Channeling is supposed to come from deities and such, and mentalism, it comes from your own willpower. Now, I do feel like, other than some of the penalties for casting, there is not enough distinction. Now, unfortunately, that would mean that the game would get probably a whole lot more complicated, and I don't think that that's really what we want. This is really that's kind of a catch-22. Now, if we were to take a look at the next way it's broken down, within each realm, you still have 3 general groups of spells. There are the open spells, the open lists. And it's kind of hard. Like, if I'm trying to take a top-down approach, so this list word, we'll have to talk about that in a minute if I want to take a top-down approach. So they're the open lists, and these are all the easiest, like, beginner level spells in that realm. Doesn't mean that they're actually only for levels, 1 through 5 or something like that. It's just that concept-wise and power-wise, these are the simplest things in essence. Even if you're talking about a 20th level spell, it's a easy beginner level 20th level spell is what it is. Then come the closed lists. So those are more difficult, and then they get closer and deeper into the concepts that this realm really gets in, that really does well. So if we take a quick look at this, open essence, we have you won't necessarily see all of this, but you've got some ways to modify your spells to enhance them. You've got detection, you've got smaller illusions, you've got telekinesis, and you've got protection from spells and the actual outside elements. You get down to the closed list, and you've got stronger things like messing with people's minds and souls a bit, like they're how they're feeling, invisibility, really modifying your spells, modifying your body, teleportation. The base lists are grouped by the profession that is tied to, that has spellcasting abilities in that realm. So, in essence, it would be the magician, the illusionist, the alchemist, the monk, the evil magician, the sorcerer, and the sorcerer. Yeah, that's all of them. So these are the ones that contain their spells, the spells that are specifically tied to their profession. For the most part, I believe that the intention was that it would be very difficult and rare, if at all allowed or possible for an essence user who has the magician bent, thus the profession, to pick up illusionist spells. Now, they can pick up illusion spells by hitting the open and closed lists, but not the actual illusionist base list. So, if you're thinking about spell capability per power point, which is tied to the level of the spell, the base lists are the most powerful. Then it's the closed lists, and then it's the open lists. You will even find plenty of things like I was talking about affecting someone's spirit or mind or something like that over here in the closed essence. This is something that would be really basic in the mentalist realm or the channeling realm. It would probably be in the opens, but over here it's in the closed. It's a little more difficult to use essence magic to do that. But that doesn't mean you can do everything in essence. You won't find any healing here in the essence lists, except for the monk's list of body renewal, which, to be fair, like even showing this here is almost an oddball because right away in one of the expansion books they addressed, maybe we should have, if you want, they provided it as an option. It was almost more like a correction though. That monk should have been in mentalism and that the bard here should have been in essence. So, alright, now I've skipped down to a ranger's base list. This page of the book has two base lists. In Rolemaster 2, the spells were 2 lists per page. So this is a list. Now we're actually looking at the individual spells. So you have the moving way lists. And that's one level of categorization too, right? The list. So the moving way list, which was a base ranger list, which meant it was a channeling list, had these spells: stone running, limb walking, swimming, water walking. As you go through the levels here, these are their spells. All the way up to a 50th level spell in that list. So these are all the individual spells in that list. You notice that there aren't actual 50 spells. There might be 20 at the top. Tick, 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 tick. Nope. No, it stops at 15, then jumps to 20, 25, 30. Most of the lists stop at 20 and then start jumping every 5 or 10 levels. So another way that they broke down the spells, and this was functionally important in the game, not so much in the resolution, but as you're developing your spellcaster, is they talked about the A section, the B section, the D section, and the E sections. So the B, let's start with this. The A section were all spells 1 through 5 in a list. The B section were all spells 1 through 10 in a list. The C section were the C through 10, or C through 10, 6th through 10th level spells of the list. And not quite finally, the D section, 11th through 20th level spells in a list. And then the E basically existed multiple times. So 25 was an E, 30 is an E, and 50 is an E. Where A, B, C, and D came into relevance was when you were learning spells. When you spent development points on a spell list in Rolemaster 2, you spent them on not only on a spell list, but on a portion of a spell list. The A, B, C, D, or E portion of the spell list. And which ones you got to work on were based on the relationship between what was the category of the list, is open, closed, or base, versus your profession. So, pure spell users, absolute pure spell users, always learn things in the big chunks. B's, D's, and E's. Because learning a spell list was much like a single static maneuver skill check. And if you could look back at the other skill video, so it was make a roll, add the relevant skill, was the result 101 or higher. So if you were a pure spell user, let's say a magician, and you are just starting off learning your fire law list, that is a base list, and you're a pure spell user, so you are trying to practice the B section of the list. When you succeed, when you scored 101 or higher on your base list roll check, which you only got to do when you were leveling, you now understood and could, technically speaking, be possible to cast spells 1 through 10 on that list. You could be level 1. You probably don't have any more than, at best, let's say you had 2 power points per level and a 3 times multiplier somehow as a first level character. It gave you 6 power points. Well, you can't possibly even cast 7, 8, 9, or 10, but you know them. And the second you have access to that many power points, you can cast them. The next time you come back to the Fire Law list, you'll be studying Section D, which is 11 through 20. And then when you came back, you studied an E, right? So you studied 25, and then you would study 30, and then you would study 35, and then you would study 50, right? And if you were this magician and you wanted to pick up an open list or a closed list, it essentially worked the same way. Hybrid spell users, if they were working on their base list, they could study things in B, D, and E as well. But when it came to the open list, they only got to do B. So if you were the mentalism channeling hybrid, when you study, there is no mentalist channeling hybrid open or closed list, right? At that point, the only thing that is a mentalist channeling spell list are your base lists. That's it. There are no open lists. So an open list that you wanted to study had to either be channeling or mentalism. So it wasn't quite up your alley. So you got to study the B portion, but you couldn't study the D portion. It was too antithetical for you. That's the concept around this design. And if you studied a closed list, that got so much that got deeper into that realm, but only that realm, and therefore farther away from the realm, the other realm that you knew. So you only got to do A and C. So you got to the first time you studied it and successfully got it, you got spells 1 through 5, and the next time you would get spells 6 through 10. So really, if you think about it, from that profession, the discussion of how a profession is different in Rolemaster than a class, it's what you find easiest to learn. When you pick a hybrid spell class, that means what you find easiest to understand is the Venn diagram section where channeling and mentalism cross, for example. Not where channeling, it's not where that you really understand channeling and you really understand mentalism, and thus you work them both together. It's that you only actually really best understand where they do already overlap. And if you're only using one or the other, you're hampered. It's like you keep trying to study this channeling open list or closed list, and you keep dragging mentalist ideas into the picture. Semi-spell users, such as a ranger, or a bard, or a monk, the ones that use partial combat and partial spells, they still got to do B, D, and E in their own base lists. But immediately, once they got to open lists, they're already restricted to the A's and C's, so the 1 through 5 portion, and then the 6 through 10 portion. And they couldn't even do closed lists at all. Closed lists got too deep into the content of that realm of magic for them to really be able to pick up on. Whereas Rolemaster overall is open on anybody picking up any skill, not so much for, you could still pick up spell list acquisition, which was the skill, but it was a question of which spells you were allowed to pick up. And if you look at the non-spell users, say your average fighter, thief, rogue person, all they were ever allowed to learn was 1 through 5, let me highlight it, 1 through 5 of an open list. That's it. So, just to comment that So far, I've only been describing Rolemaster 2. Now, much like the skills section video, I'm not really going to be going into RMSS or RMFRP for this discussion. I will say that they tossed the entire learn spells by list sections. They kept the lists, but it was simply when you put one rank in, you got the first level spell. When you put another rank in, you got the second level spell. Third rank, third spell. Fourth rank, fourth spell, etc., etc. That's and they someone put that in as an optional rule in one of the Rolemaster 2 companion books in the first place, and I think that was the desire of the community at that point, and RMSS and RMFRP went that direction. It's certainly easier as a GM and even as a player. Sometimes when I get really lucky, I will say that is a lot easier to manage, but there's just something interesting about the idea of opening your mind up to, oh, eureka, I've got it. I understand all these basic fire spells. I don't have the power to do them all, but I understand them. Like, I like that idea. So I still like to play with it sometimes. But that is basically the extent of my RMSS, RMFRP knowledge when it comes to the spells. I think other than that, it's mostly the same as what you're going to get in the others. RMU has chosen to go with the individual spell route way, just like RMSS and RMFRP. So, all right, now let's talk about the resolution of spells. The resolution of spells is broken down by the kind of spell they are. Yes, yet another categorization method, which actually I didn't even think about covering a second ago. That's basically non-attack spells, basic attack spells, and I forget what the names are. We'll check them out in a second. So in Rolemaster 2, if you had a non-attack spell, let's say Levitate, all you need to do was make a roll. And then you can see this is an old scan of the book. It's not an actual PDF of the book. Rolemaster, the original Rolemaster books are really old. They didn't have PDFs of those books, and no one has a license for those anymore, so you're not going to get them. This is the only way you're going to get a PDF of the book, is just scanning it. So this text is not real clear. But essentially, roll. If you rolled a 1 or a 2, you fumbled. And if you rolled 3 or higher, success. Simple as that. If it's something like levitation, that's all you needed to do. Now, if it's a basic attack spell, so this is not a non-attack spell, obviously, and not a, quote, elemental attack spell. Now, so basically you had non-attack spells, and then you had bars, B-A-R, basic attack rolls, for the basic attack spells. And then you had EARs, or ears, I guess, elemental attack rolls for the elemental attack spells. So, when you're making a basic attack roll, you would roll your skill. Actually, you didn't even roll a skill. You just rolled your number, your dice. You added numbers for your level. You added some situational modifiers, like how close to your target are you. And what you were essentially doing was setting the difficulty of their resistance roll, of the target's resistance roll. So it was an opposed die check system through the wordage, the verbiage of a resistance roll. So let's say you rolled a 70 and you're a level 5 and you are close enough to get a plus 10 onto your basic attack roll, your bar. So that's 70 plus 5 plus 10 for 85. So you'd look up 85 on this chart here. Now, if this was just some general spell that didn't really matter about target stuff, then you would just look up right here. And we're not going to get into this. Now, whether that was up to GM decision or whether there's an actual rule in here for it, I honestly don't remember. These are the nuances that would fall through the crack for me while I'm actually running the game. General, you got an 85, that falls here to 85 to 88, negative 45. So what you are doing, you are going to modify the target number for the target's resistance roll number, by negative 44. And that sounds, or you're modifying their roll. So if you are level 5, like I said before, so that means you are here. This is the attack level. If they were level 5 as well, the number that is found there when you look it up is 50. So you rolled well enough that they need to make a 50. They need to roll a 50 or higher on their resistance roll. So they're going to get their, let's say if you're an essence caster, they're going to get their essence resistance modifier, which is put together by racial bonuses and the same stat that an essence caster uses for their magic, which would be empathy. So their empathy bonus, the racial bonus if they happen to have one, maybe some others from wearing other doodads that they might have that might be adding to their resistance level. They'd add that on top of their D100 roll and subtract negative 40. Why negative 40? Because you rolled so well on your basic attack roll. So basically, you cast a spell well enough to make it strong. Right? If you had rolled something much lower, maybe you would be adding 30 to their resistance roll. So then they get here and they flub a roll with like a 15. They add a bit for their race. They add a bit for their stat. And they add 30 because you didn't cast your spell very well. Boom, they resist the spell. Now I find that to be really interesting because it does make it an opposed roll system, but it's clunky. I mean, you can just see how clunky this is. Rolemaster Unified definitely simplified this and streamlined it a bit. So when you cast your spell, you just cast your spell, and you've already got what modifiers you've got in there, maybe based off of distance or whatever. They just simply have to beat your roll, and they're adding their resistance modifier. Done. Whoever wins that, whoever gets higher is the victor. So that was, I really liked that. And if you look at this chart, you'll notice that it's 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, all the way down in all the equal levels. Like this is one of those things you hardly even needed a chart for. Same. Look at that. 47, 47, 47, 48. So, I mean, a table was necessary for this because you couldn't memorize this. Which just makes it even more clunky. Like, this table here is a good excuse for jokingly referring to Rolemaster as Chartmaster. Because this really wasn't... Was this all really necessary? I don't know. So, that is your basic attack roll for a non-elemental spell. Now let's look at an elemental attack roll. An elemental attack roll works just like attacking someone with a sword or bow. You have an attack table for that spell. Why? Because even magical ice, when it's thrown, still hits a person and operates differently based on the kind of armor that they're wearing. And it deals criticals just like a weapon does. And just like weapons, there are different kinds of criticals. So here's a zoom in on the Ice Bolt attack table. Let me swap to the other screen. And I'll decrease the size a little bit here for you. So, here's armor types 1 through 20. So wearing nothing all the way to complete picture-esque stereotypical paladin. And here are your rolls. You still had if you have an unmodified 1 or 2, you failed. And what's interesting is, yes, if you tried to attack someone in all the plate mails or the chains, you still had a 20% chance of failing, period. Now, you also started hitting them a lot earlier. And if you look at actual AT20, you went from failing to delivering some amount of hits. And you started you started dealing criticals in addition to hits as low as 51. So you see the level of the hits delivered and the severity of the criticals, your A's, your B's, your C's, your D's. Here, you see that the criticals did go beyond E. You can get Fs and Gs. The way that operated was you simply rolled the critical twice. And you took the, like for an F, you took the results of an E, and you took that description, and you added on the numerical statistical effects of an A critical as well. And the G was an E and a B, etc., etc. Now what you'll see down here is that each table would also tell you what are you using for the criticals. On the spell tables, you're not going to hit with the opposite side of the ice bolt. So they reduce the data a little bit by just telling you the hits and the severity, and at the bottom tell you, hey, like in this particular instance, an ice bolt uses the impact critical table. So when you're looking at this 10C critical up here, you notice a 10C impact critical. Now, should you get up to the Fs and Gs, what they also did was they used something else as well. So you used the impact criticals for the E, but at this point they also start hitting you with more cold. Sure, an ice bolt is obviously cold water, but what's really been hitting you is that it's a solid force that bang hits you, but it's still cold. And if it hits you this bad, then what you're also getting damaged by is the cold. If you want to take a different look at this, let's take a look at a different attack table for the spells. So here's the lightning bolt table. You see F, Gs, Hs, Is, Js. Yeah, the lightning bolt critical table, or the lightning bolt spell, was ridiculously powerful. It was also high level. So in here you see that you always use electricity criticals. That's your primary critical type. Once you get to the secondary critical, though, you start using impacts. So you've been hit by this lightning bolt so hard, it's actually starting to like physically crush your body with the force that it's throwing you. And if you get hit really hard with it, you might as well just take some heat criticals, because it's burned you. It just didn't burn you electrically, it burns you as if there was actual fire. As I wrap up this video, which I don't feel has been one of my best, but sorry about that. Well, just kind of review this book a little bit and say that, you know, here's an entire chapter of optional rules, much like the rest of Rolemaster. Tons of optional rules here. They have an entire chapter here on magic research, like as in researching new spells, and item creation. It's interesting things like there's a maximum level of the spell that can be embedded in a ring or a small wand versus a scepter, rather than just being kind of generic about it. I feel like that gives it a bit more depth, but with depth comes having to look at more rules and more understandings. They have a whole chapter here that's on special notes on some of the spell lists. For instance, invisibility. That's always has tons of questions, right? So they go ahead and address all of these separately from talking about invisibility in the spell list. In the spell list of invisibility, it just says, hey, you know, you're invisible for this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. To go through all the special things like what's it mean to attack someone, and, you know, what's it mean to be invisible? Can you still be smelled? Things like that in the special notes, as well as the whole idea of canceling a spell, combining spell effects, stun relief and awakening spells, how those work, encumbrance limits for movement spells. If you have a spell that gives you a 50-foot jump, how does your heavy backpack modify that? We know how it modifies that if you were to just jump, but how does that modify that if you have a magical jump? Things like that. It has a whole chapter on those. And the last thing I want to talk about is the timing. So I had said way back in the general concepts of Rolemaster that in Rolemaster, magic is powerful, but magic is slow. And that to cast the spell equal to your own level, you'd have to have 2 rounds of prep before you even got the spell off. So start prepping the first round of combat. You're still prepping the second round of combat. It goes off the third round of combat. A but note to that is that the battle round had a fairly broken up sequence, both in the original Rolemaster 2 and then in RMSS, though the breakdowns were different. And in Rolemaster 2, the battle sequence, let's see if we can just go ahead and pull that up, gave an order to the way that things are executed. So spells come first, then missiles, then movement and any maneuver skills, and then melee attacks got resolved. So while you might have had to spell prep for 2 rounds, your spell went off at the very beginning of the third round before anyone else could do anything else. There was actually no initiative even for that 1 through 5 part. Initiative only mattered if there was conflict in 6 and if there was conflict in 7. So yeah, you had to wait longer, but you also got off, your spell went off right away. So if you got through those first 2 rounds of prep, then your spell happened immediately, even before people shot arrows or ran around. And the reason why this is important to bring up is because as I was preparing to run a little bit more Rolemaster Unified before we moved with some friends, I ran back to the forum board and did a little bit of quick searching and found out that they had made some significant changes to the plan for Rolemaster Unified. One of those being there is no longer spell prep. There's no longer spell prep. If you are watching this video out of love of the Rolemaster system but you're not actually keeping up on Rolemaster Unified, I'm sure your jaw has just dropped and hit the floor, or maybe you're elated. But there's no more spell prep. Now what they've done is they have increased the penalty for overcasting. I think they may have tweaked another penalty or 2. And what they give you now are plus 10 bonuses per round of spell prep. Period. You don't have to be trying to overcast. You don't have to be trying to cast with penalties. If you're casting a level 1 spell that simply demands a resistance roll from your target and you want to make sure that they fail it, spend 5 rounds prepping it. There's plus 50 to your roll. Now hopefully you don't roll really, really poorly and still make it easy for them to resist your spell. But now you get plus 10 per round that you have prepped. So if you want to cast a spell that is on level, you just simply cast it that round. It might do you well to wait a round or 2 and cast it stronger. And if you're casting a spell over your level, you definitely probably want to be taking a round or 2 to prep that spell. I've run the game a little bit with that, and it made a world of difference. It made a world of difference. Of all the interesting, unique things about Rolemaster, the spell prep was one that I found was unique. I appreciated it for its uniqueness, for what it gave the game. It gave that heavier, weightier sense to Magic. But the number of times that someone started summoning a stun cloud to hit 8 targets, and by the time it got cast out, it was only hitting 3 targets, 2 of which saved, just really annoyed my players, and I could totally understand it as a GM. So I think this is a good change. I don't want to be like everybody else necessarily, but it just didn't work well. Maybe if the spell was cast first and then you had some kind of recovery that you had to go through to keep doing other things, maybe that would have been different. But with the way it was with spell prepping and then casting, yeah, I think this removal of spell prep rounds is making a huge difference to the way the game feels. And it's definitely going to make a huge difference to the way the game feels to all the new people. You know, when I go to conventions and I go to game shops and I run my beginner scenarios there, This is going to make a huge difference in a good way, obviously, in a good way. So this is my discussion of spells. I hope I didn't leave anything out. I hope this doesn't get too awful sounding in the editing. And I'll see you guys later, and I hopefully see you soon.